John chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. Emmanuel?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Nice and loud. Throw it out there.
Good morning, everyone. This is John chapter 9, verse 1 through 7. As he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus. "But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Dr. Young talked about that verse for a couple of mornings. How many people heard those morning devotions? Okay, very good. The rest of you will still have a chance to get to heaven, but it's going to be more in danger. Just so that you know. But I do have friends in the right places, so I'll put in a good word for you. So who am I and who do I belong to? In this verse, Dr. Young talked a lot about absolute faith, absolute obedience, and absolute love. Did this man have absolute obedience? Yes. Do we have that same level of obedience, Sharon?
Trying every day.
Trying every day. Jeff, do we have that same level of obedience?
I do not know.
Neither do I, but we're all trying, right? So out of absolute love, absolute obedience, and absolute faith, which is most important? Hide, which is most important? I'm going to put you on the spot. There's no wrong or right answers here. This is philosophical reasoning, so you don't have to worry that you're going to make it wrong just a minute, Sharon. Go ahead, Hide.
Absolute obedience.
Absolute obedience. Reason? Same? Jack?
I would say faith.
Absolute faith. Sharon?
Love.
Love. Okay. John? There's not an answer.
Faith, love, obedience, all of them are important.
All important. Very good. Go ahead. They're all
That's
important.
what they're all important.
Okay. Tim?
I had to pick one. I'd pick obedience.
Obedience.
I would say love.
Love. Stephanie?
Love.
Love. Okay. Emmanuel?
I believe they can't exist without each other. I believe they can't exist without each other. I believe they all can cohesive harmony.
Amen.
Okay. So the best answer is, in my opinion, love, but you're all correct, and it depends on yourself. What's more important? Dr. Young talked very extensively about obedience being most important, but when you get down to it, what does he talk about normally? Obedience or heart? Heart or obedience? I know you just walked in the door. Which is more important? Heart. So love is more important. It's what we focus on. But if you're absolutely obedient, then you also can experience love and faith, right? So it's a mixture of all those. So
Depends who you're obedient to.
Sorry?
What is the focus of your faith and who are you obedient to?
That's
What do you
also
obey?
That's very true too. Who is your master? Who do you follow? And what can you achieve? So talking about who am I and who do I belong, as John was talking about, yes, who am I following? Am I following my own desires or am I following... Sarah, wait, can make this sit up. About there. Okay, great, thanks. So when we talk about our who do we belong, who am I, Emmanuel's going to be talking about part of his testimonial today. And excuse me, I think one of the big challenges for us as our movement is changing and as we're moving forward, I think to understand our identity, and especially for the second gen and younger people, how do we understand who we are and who do we belong to? For myself, I have a kind of complicated background. My grandparents were Irish and Scottish. I grew up in Australia. I moved to America in 1980. And religiously, my mother was a very, very devout Catholic. I went to Catholic schools from a young age through high school. And when I came to the States, I joined the Unification movement. But then later I joined the Baptist Church in Paterson, New Jersey. So I consider myself a Catholic Baptist Unification Universalist. And when I said that on one of the ACLC meetings with Sharon in one morning, the ministers really lit up about it because we were talking about different issues and politics, and some people were getting upset. But when they heard that, they were really inspired because what we have to do, I believe, is go beyond any political party and be able to build bridges, which is what we do at the Women's Federation. It's our whole focus, right? Excuse me. Did I get a drink, please? So True Father has told us many times in the 1990s especially. True Father told us many times in the 1990s, what more do you want me to say? And I heard it at least a dozen times. And when I reflected on it, I realized he wants us to be more than just followers. He needs us to be leaders. Sharon seems to like that one. So we have to find a balance. We have to be obedient to God's will, but also become leaders. And even probably more important for the second gen, we have to be able to put them into, and young people in general, we have to put them into leadership positions and allow them to do what they're going to do. When President Nyakimi was first appointed, I was really curious of how he was going to do it. And I thought, he's really young. He's much younger than any church president. You compare him to Mike Balcom, Dr. Jenkins, many of our leaders. He doesn't have that much experience. But I've been very much impressed with him. He stood up and said things that Dr. Balcom didn't say. Many people have much more experience in the church. He's talked about true family members and challenging issues very, very succinctly and very openly, and with a lot of guts. So I can see Mother's choice actually has a lot of wisdom. But also I realize that he's... Yeah, I'm just going to take this out. I'll do that one. I realize that Mother's put him there because he has a great coach in Dr. Young. So I think she put him there to raise up the younger people, but also to know that there's a coach there. And I believe a lot of our first-gen older members have to also realize that we don't always have to be in the center of everything. We don't have to lead everything. And for the last couple of decades, I've actually focused more on ambassadors for peace, ministers, and the second gen. Because why? How much longer are we going to live, Tim?
Not much longer.
Not much longer. We don't have 40 more years. Wondering how long are you going to live for?
Forever. Got Benjamin Button's disease.
Forever, okay.
Really?
I'm sure it's going to be more than 10 or 20 years. The way I feel right now, 10 or 20 years is very optimistic. So when Father asked us that, what more do you want me to say? I realized he wants us to become self-actualized. He wants us to take the mantle. He wants us to lead. And he needs us to lead. Yes, we are children of God. However, we need to become successful adults. At one meeting he had with the seminary grads, I don't know, were you there, Sharon, in around 95 or 96 at East Garden? I don't know if you weren't there. Anyway, he asked us, how many of you want to become millionaires? And, you know, everyone's sitting there very faithfully, and 2 or 3 people very sheepishly put up their hands. Very, very sheepishly. And he started screaming at us. I said, get up! You all have to become millionaires. And this was kind of unusual, because I had never heard that you're supposed to become rich. And I've heard for a long time, sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Forget about your family. Don't focus on your family. Get out and do church work and
Sacrifice.
sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. I would come back from international events and Reverend Kwok would be screaming at us, go into the office. And June and Emmanuel and my other son would be like, we need your help, we need your support, you've got to be here. Dr. Walsh is telling me, don't even join a church. I'm being told on one side, join churches, on the other side, you do the mission. And when June went off to Korea, Dr. Walsh got really angry at us. Why are you going out there doing a mission? UPF is your mission, that's all you have to do. And Dr. Walsh has a lot of great connection with true parents. He's probably one of the most loyal leaders. I'm not putting him down. But the whole focus on just sacrificing and not actually taking care of ourselves, our health, our families, did that bring success? What percentage of the BCs are connected, honey, today in America, do you think?
No, I mean, if I'm going based on the church I came from, out of 100, 5 are ones I remember.
Yeah, the stat that we come up with is somewhere around 10 or 20%, but it may even be less. So if you have a business and 80% of your meals are being thrown away, is that going to be a successful sushi business? No, not good. So if we're losing 80%, then why ones that are only 5 to 20% involved?
Because when they do get involved, or they say something that's different from what's being said, they get beaten down here, usually. And then they're demoralized and basically accused of, why aren't you following and listening instead of actually having an independent thought?
Right. So that's where we have to evolve. And I believe that's where our leadership has to change. And I really appreciate Bob Honeycutt, Ryoko, because their form of leadership is more, how can we help people evolve? How can we help them make choices, be leaders? Are they going to make mistakes? Yes. Did we make mistakes? Of course we did. Are we still going to make mistakes? Of course we are. But we're not going to be here forever, so if we're not raising up young people, what's going to happen with our church? And this is not just true for our church, it's true for every Christian church. You go into any Christian church today, I live in Hendersonville, 90% of the churches are all people my age. I'm actually one of the younger ones at one of the Episcopal church I go to. The Catholics have it down because they have schools of young people coming in. But they primarily leave once they go off to college, and they're maintaining a very small percentage as well. So we have to change our leadership style. We have to focus more on where we're going and how we're going to get there. So before I go into the next section, I'm going to do a brief reading from Mother of Peace's book. Dr. Young does this every day. And this last week, he's been talking a lot about the visit to Moscow, the visit to North Korea. And he's also been talking a lot about mother's position. On November 27th, 1994, at Belvedere Training Center in New York, Father Moon again announced my public mission as a movement's second founder. At that time, the educational program for 160,000 Japanese women in significant events in certain nations had concluded, so my role was expanding. On that day, I resolved in front of members, let's all pledge to become the family that will unite and establish the traditions of true parents. So again, there's been a lot of discussion and debate about mother's position, and especially as the only begotten daughter of God. And that's a kind of tough thing to explain to ministers, and especially to Catholics. But that's something that Dr. Hendricks actually is working on in Korea, and it's something that I've had several discussions with Dr. Young about in different breakout rooms. So understanding our identity of who we come from, who am I, understanding the position of Heavenly Parents, understanding especially the position of True Mother at this time, is a key element of all of that. In April 1990, a few days after the Parents' Day celebration, my husband and I and our eldest son, Kojan, arrived in Moscow. The venue was the 11th World Media Conference and First Council for World Peace, sponsored by the World Media Association and the Unity of Latin America. During the conference, President Mikhail Gorbachev invited the participating world leaders to the Kremlin Palace. Mother was the only woman in that group. So that was a big change in world leadership. And being in that area a year later when the coup happened was a very, very intense time. I'd grown up with Eastern Europeans, and it was a very, very frightening time. As the meeting went on with Gorbachev, Father began advising President Gorbachev. The success of the Soviet Union depends on whether you put God at the center or not. Atheism will lead to nothing but self-destruction and disaster. Father Moon told President Gorbachev that the only way for the Soviet Union to survive was for Russia to continue its economic and political reforms and to allow freedom of religions. President Gorbachev's face showed he was well aware of the enormity of Father Moon's advice, yet he could not help but receive what he said. Never before had anyone said anything like that in the Kremlin. Looking back, I feel confident to say that the words we exchanged at that moment changed the history of the world. So we all have to be world leaders. That's what we need to do. And we have to help raise up the young people to also be leaders. Now I want to go on to meeting with Kim Il-sung. On the 7th day, we finally met Chairman King. The first order of business was lunch. They exchanged small talk. At that time, visitors from the free world visited North Korea at the risk of their lives. Communists hate religion, and my husband and I were co-founders of a religion. In addition to that, we were leaders of a global movement to end communism. So obviously these were life-threatening issues, and John and Sharon know this very well. To be in the Soviet Union as it was changing, as we were, was incredibly challenging. Looking back, I reflect that it was at the moment communism reached its zenith that my husband and I risked our lives to go to Moscow and Pyongyang. With joyful hearts as representatives of the free world, we embraced enemies who had severely persecuted us. By our doing so, they were moved and we could reconcile that we laid the foundation for unification and peace. Soon after the completion of our 8-day mission, North Korea's Prime Minister, Young Hyun-mook, led a delegation to Seoul and signed the joint declaration of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So as you can see, we're still dealing with the unity of North and South Korea. And Dr. Young has stated that that could happen as early as February next year, which is mind-boggling. And we're going to be right in the middle of that. I've been in several six-party talks way back in 2005 to 2010 in Korea with leaders from the State Department, from Japan, from all the six parties. And now we're still doing a lot of that kind of work. So Mother is bringing in a new form of leadership to us, and that's what's bringing change. So coming back to what is different now, what does Dr. Young talk about that's very different? What does he focus on? Besides the broken heart of God, what are the essence of his morning speeches that are different? How many of you are there every morning? I'm not going to put you on the spot or anything.
Well, he talks about a lot of different things.
He does. But he has a different style than any Korean leader that I've ever known, going back 40 years.
He gives a solution.
He gives solutions,
Is the ministry of personal touch.
personal touch, and
Art.
what are we having for lunch? Personal touch and food. Have you ever heard a Korean leader talk about food?
Food ministry.
Food ministry and a personal touch ministry. But there's a key element that he has that I've never heard from Reverend Clark, Dr. Silk, Reverend Park. Bishop Kim got into it a little bit.
That you should actually take care of your family first.
Take care of your family first, revolutionary. You have to go out and sacrifice. What the heaven are you doing here? Sacrifice. Why aren't you in Africa? That's what I heard for decades and decades. Sacrifice your family, sacrifice your children. Look at our results. But there's one key point. How did we start the morning service today? Emmanuel,
Right.
what did you read from? And whose words did you read? Jesus. The difference with Dr. Young, all those things you say are true. The difference with Dr. Young is he has a relationship with true Father, true Mother, and Jesus. And when you hear him speak here, he'll get really, really loud, really loud. So I'm just letting you know the music's going to be really loud. So if you come here with a headache on September 21st, take lots of Tylenol.
I don't have ibuprofen.
And ibuprofen or whatever you need, because it's going to be really loud. Levi Doherty is coming. We're going to pump up the sound. It's going to be hopping. And this is not our normal church service, so if you're not used to it, go to a black service, African American church today, and get psyched, because it's going to be really loud. And you're going to hear a lot about Jesus. The reason we're doing what we're doing, which is completely revolutionary. John, how many pastors in America in the last 20 years have gone through the 40-day and 3-day ceremony?
Very few, if any.
Zero. Maybe Archbishop Stallings, but I'm not even sure if he did all of that. But, you know, people who aren't in our inner circle, zero. And it's because of the spirit that we build up. It's because of all your prayers, all your efforts. And if you can't do anything else, pray. Pray and pray more. Whatever conditions you can do. The two most successful witnesses in America, Sharon, you should be able to answer this one.
People that pray.
People who pray, who do conditions, but who are the two most successful?
Serve, what was the other condition? Serve?
Serve.
Are you asking for who?
Who? Yeah. Who?
Oh, Son Willett
Sunwood is number one.
and, the white pastor.
The white pastor, that white guy.
Yeah, Reverend Abernathy. Right, Reverend Abernathy.
In this group, you can use that term on the 21st. Let's stay away from the white-black statements, okay? African American, Caucasian, because when a black minister, African American minister hears that, it's okay, but we have to evolve. But you're absolutely right, Dr. Abernathy. And Dr. Abernathy is being really critiqued by our church. Well, you didn't do it the right way. You're not an official blessing advisor. What is it called? Advisor or officiator. You're not official. He's blessed 3,600 couples. Can you imagine that? But you're not doing it the right way. Hello? Hello? It's like, what more do you want me to do? So he went and became an official blessing officiator. Now, how would God look at someone like Son Willett and Dr. Abernathy? They're doing phenomenal conditions. When he joined with us, an interesting side story, he was at a UPF event that I was at, and I was sitting at a table with Dr. Jenkins and him, and he asked him, what am I doing here? You guys got so much expertise, you've got so many world leaders. And finally, I said to him, we're here because you're here because we need to learn from you. We need to learn about Jesus. And his eyes went, boom! Just like that. He lit up like a lamp. And I could validate his value of being there, being with all these brilliant scholars, people from all over the world, Andrew Wilson, Frank Hoffman, Mike Up, and the list goes on and on and on. And the people that we bring are also really, really brilliant. I was once asked, what is the difference between independence, individuality, and individualism from a Christian, Hindu, Muslim, and unification viewpoint, and why is your viewpoint any better? Those are the kind of questions we would get asked in those events. I just talked about interdependence and the Confucian ethic and a few things to get myself off the hook, and they've got somebody else talking. And the person who asked the question already knew the answer, so I let them answer most of it. But those are the kinds of complex questions. And the other point that's even more important is, who can understand the principle better? And this is really, really important. Can unificationists understand it better? Can Koreans? Can Christian ministers understand it better? Difficult question. Headache? Who can understand it better?
Say Christian ministers.
Christian ministers. The Koreans have obviously got it now because they understand what from Korea, honey, that you studied while you lived there. Korean English ethic, C ethic, Confucian ethic. If you don't understand the Confucian ethic, if you don't understand the Bible, and even after the years I spent at the seminary, the Divine Principle was retranslated by a class that I attended with Jin-Gun Kim of Andrew Wilson. And every 5 minutes, Jin-Gun would stand up and say, that's wrong. And Andrew was getting, if you know Andrew Wilson, you don't get up in front of his class and start telling him that's wrong. So from that, the exposition of the Divine Principle that you study now was written by Jin-Gun, Andrew, and June. And June actually wrote the chapter on the Messiah chapter, because she was really the only traditional Christian amongst the three of them. So the difference then is that these ministers and Andrew and Jin-Gun can understand the principle in a different way, because they understand the Confucian ethic. But the ministers really get it. He's blessed 3,600 couples because he is the Bible. He can teach through the Bible. And that's what I'm beginning to do on these online holy communities that Emmanuel is part of. We have to learn to teach the principle through the Bible, not the other way around. Because I guarantee you, if I asked you 40 questions, I doubt whether there'd be one person in here, maybe Sharon, who could answer half of those questions. Like, I'll give you one example. Why is the book of John redactional, even though I used it today, so it's a little bit strange? Why is it redactional? What does that mean? What does redactional mean? Even just to understand that, it means it was written 400 years after the life of Jesus. So it's not accurate according to Jesus' theologians. That's something you don't even have to worry about too much. But that's the kind of thing that we have to at least have in your back pocket. If you ever go to a mega church and you're talking with a minister, you have to understand certain biblical points. So we don't all have to become biblical experts, but we do have to know that there's a lot that we don't understand. And we have to be humble to these people. Who is going to save them? Everyone. Who's going to lead the pack? God. That's very, very good one, isn't it? Now, who's going to be behind God? We do need some physical bodies here. It's going to be the religious leaders, okay? We don't have the foundation. We're good as catalysts. We're good at getting something started. We changed the world with communism, but we had to bring in Gorbachev, we had to bring in Reagan, the Pope. You know, we're really good at getting conditions done and getting things started, but we can't change everything. And we're really good as coaches. And who's going to be behind the Christian ministers?
Unificationists,
Who are going to be leading the unificationists?
Christians.
Behind the Christians, who's going to be in the front of the unificationists? You. No, I'll be in the way in the back. It will be young people, okay? The ministers, young people, and we'll be the coaches behind everybody, okay? Bringing up the rear guard. And we have to understand that's our position, okay? And it's okay. I was once told by John Williams when I was dealing with a couple and the sister was going through a lot of issues and I tried to parent that sister. And he said, forget about it, you're never going to do it. But you can be a good aunt or good uncle. So we have to be coaches and advisors. Okay, I went way off topic, but normally happens. I have all these notes, I have 2 more pages of notes, but I would like to give it over to Emmanuel because I think the key point is we have to understand and do something different. That's my point. My point is, whom do I belong? Who am I? I am a child of God. I need to be successful. I need to go out there and love people, like Jesus loved people, and connect with them. You don't even have to become a Bible expert. If you go out there, especially if you have young children, that's gold. I went to all the black churches as myself. You know what they told me? Oh, you're just like every other salesman that comes in the door here. I went with June and the kids. Bingo. No problem. You're part of us. Hugs to everybody. So things can change when we show them we are Christian. And when we show them we love Jesus. And what terminology would I say that you've never used in the first 3 or 4 times? That Dr. Abernathy has told us, Sharon, don't talk about?
Oh, sorry, I can't think.
Don't talk about true parents. We use our in-house language out there, and Dr. Abernathy said he was at one event in Vegas at IPEC, and one of our members went up to talk to the ministers that he brought, and Dr. Abernathy said, don't go and talk to those people, you confuse them. But this very arrogant member went and did it and confused these people. And Dr. Abernathy walked over and said, just forget about whatever that person said. They don't know what they're talking about. So we don't want to be those people. We want to be humble. We don't want to talk about Jacques Saran. Okay? I mean, he's probably the only person in here that really understands what that means. I'm very curious why he talks about Jacques Saran and not Chung Saran, because Father only ever talked about Chung Saran. All he talked about is Jacques Saran, but that's a whole other discussion. Okay, I'm going to sit down because I've probably gone on too long.